McLean. Coach's Corner.
You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer.
For someone to explain.
Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
All right, welcome to episode number 47 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Will Webster. Will is the assistant coach for the Kenya Sevens team on the HSBC World Series and just finished his first year with the group. Will went to Kenya in 2014 as Director of Sport at Kenton College Preparatory School, coached several clubs in Kenya's top flight league as a skills coach, defence coach, and then as a head coach. His playing career involves stints at US Oyonnax in France and Western Province Institute of Rugby in South Africa. And he was also a member of the Exeter Chiefs Academy. It's a pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Will.
Hi, Andy. How you doing? It's really flattered to be invited on here, and hopefully I'll offer a little bit of content as well.
Yeah, no worries. No, it's good to have you on, and this is actually round two. We had some technical issues, so I want to thank you again for doing a re-record and coming back on.
No, pleasure.
All right, sweet. So we touched on your coaching and playing career briefly there in the intro. Can you go into a bit more detail about probably your playing history and then how that transitioned into coaching?
Yeah, sure. I've just turned 27, so it's not a particularly extensive journey so far, and it won't take me too long. But I, as you said, sort of was fortunate enough to play in France and then South Africa, and was a pretty average player, I think it would be fair to say, but absolutely loved the game, loved working hard, loved sort of the process that went into getting fit and getting ready to play, and really enjoyed that. And I think as a player without any great physical advantages, I wasn't quick, I wasn't strong, I wasn't particularly fast. It was my understanding of the game that probably meant more, or something that I had to do to catch up with the rest. So really enjoyed playing, and I think so that aspect and the process of working hard, I've tried to take into my coaching. So during my career, I spent a bit of time in South Africa and France, as I said, and then was fortunate enough to end up at Birmingham and Solihull Bees for a couple of years in the Championship, which is the second tier of English rugby. And there I was coached by Russell Earnshaw, who I know's been on the podcast.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Was assistant coach at England Sevens at the time, and that was a real, I guess, lucky position to be in, because although he's a great guy and a brilliant coach, he's a bit of a maverick, and I suppose made me look at rugby in a slightly different way. And because he was coach there, he brought a few of the England Sevens players up there as well. So I played with those guys and spent a bit of love chatting to them about Sevens and about how sort of different and unique the Sevens world is compared to the 50s world. But after a couple of years there, and after graduating from university, I wanted to move closer to home, which is down in the southwest of England, and the dream was always to play for Exeter Chiefs, and they were sort of my home club, and had done brilliantly in coming up from the Championship and getting promotion into the top league. And I spoke to Rob Baxter there, who suggested that Plymouth Albion, who again were in the second tier of English rugby, was the way forward. So I was all set to go down there and play, and went out to Kenya to actually visit family and do a bit of charity work, and came back and suffered from a virus called bilharzia, which, cut a very long story short, meant I was out the game for a year. And which, looking back, was just an absolute blessing in disguise, because I spent a year coaching, and sort of got involved with my old school at King's Taunton and coached the first 15 there, and then went out to Central America and spent some time coaching out there, and just loved it. I sort of never thought that coaching the game would be give me as much as playing the game did, but really enjoyed it. And I think that was probably the time where I thought, whenever playing finishes, come coaching's the route I want to go down. But came sort of after missing a year, I started playing again and was playing at Taunton Titans, who are now in they're in the National 2 division, so basically in the fourth tier of English rugby, and then also with the Exeter Chiefs Academy, and that was my last year playing the game. But looking back now, it was a real it's hugely advantageous to playing in those two clubs, because they're firstly extremely well run clubs. I was open to some fantastic coaches, and obviously particularly it's pretty well publicised, but Exeter Chiefs now have gone from strength to strength, and I think experiencing that in my last year of playing with coaching at the forefront of my mind was I was very fortunate to do so. So that year I did a PGCE and went out to Kenya, and I guess went out to Kenya to hopefully put myself in a position to get experiences that I perhaps wouldn't get in England, and initially went out there and, as you said, sort of coached a number of different clubs and tried to clock up as many coaching hours as I possibly could, and did a number of different roles and absolutely loved it. And that sort of led me to the position I'm in now with the Sevens team. And it's been a fairly short journey, but I'm in a fortunate position now, and I think it's just something I'm trying to make the most of. Really, really enjoying it, and hopefully, if I'm good enough, I'll make it, and if not, I won't. So yeah.
Ah, cool. That's awesome. It sounds like a good variety of experiences, both as a player and a coach. And Kenya must be quite the rugby landscape compared to anywhere else in the world. For those who don't know the Kenyan rugby landscape, what's a bit of a description of it? Is it mostly based out of Nairobi, or are there a few teams elsewhere?
Yeah, it's different. It's probably quite unique, but it's mostly based out of Nairobi. The majority of the top level clubs are in or around Nairobi, which is a bit unusual, because I think the majority of the players actually originate from Western Kenya, sort of come into Nairobi, and either purely for rugby or for work. But I think it's an interesting structure. It's very little is played in schools, particularly in junior school. It's the structure in senior schools is very loose unless you go to one of the big, more established senior schools. And I think that lack of a structured program it's probably the undoing of Kenya in terms of their 15s program. But really, the first time players will come into contact with good structured coaching is probably under 16 or under 18 level. There's very, very little age grade rugby at all in clubs. So players that come through the sort of school system are playing at lunch breaks or playing in their free time in very unstructured environments. And but then when they get into the club scene, there's a number of different leagues. There's a women's league, there's a university league, and I think the Kenyan club system is, again, quite unique in terms that it's played pretty much all year round. The calendar doesn't have an off season, so
pretty brutal.
Oh, geez, I wouldn't be able to cope with it. But I mean, players start in sort of September in terms of the 15s league. The 15s league will finish in about May time, and within that, there's a few 10s competitions and a few 7s competitions thrown in there. They then go into a cup competition that lasts until probably the end of June, and then maybe a couple of weeks off in July if you're not playing 7s. But if you are playing 7s, then July spent priming the teams ready for the local 7 circuit, which goes on August and September, and then obviously the same again next year. So I think sort of coming into that, you look at it as a bit of a negative in terms of there's no pre-season and no real time for the players to get those physical gains and spend time on the core aspects of rugby. But at the same time, what that does do is it makes the players extremely durable. They're hard guys, and I don't want to generalise Kenya rugby all as one, but I think the biggest thing I've seen coming in is that lack of early years coaching, particularly as they're growing up, and what I'm used to in the UK, all the way from sort of under 9s up to under 15s. Those really important years they miss out on, particularly in the coaching. So I think you can probably see that in many respects in terms of the core skills and the game understanding. And to be honest, probably the coachability of a lot of the players, because they're not used to being coached. It took me a bit of sort of time to pinpoint the issue, but I think the ability to give feedback and players' ability to sort of subconsciously take on that feedback during coaching sessions is a little bit backwards. But no, certainly you look at the scene in Kenya, and they're, as I said, extremely durable, extremely physical, very strong, very hard guys, and they're players, because of their background, they've got a very good natural fitness level, and I think it's just about the challenge is to try and transfer that into rugby specific fitness. But it's been an eye-opener. Really enjoyed seeing it, and I think the lack of structure is one thing, but the fact that they're still competing on the World Series and have done for any number of years is a testament to the players they're producing.
Yeah, I agree, and I love watching them too. They're just totally different to anything you've ever seen. So it's great to have them on that tour. I think it's awesome. Last time we chatted, you mentioned that along with the limited amount of coaching that they've had, that they're actually exposed to a fairly limited amount of sports, and that affects all things from basic skills, transferable skills, to decision making and those kind of things. You mentioned some stuff you do in terms of trying to upskill the group. Do you want to talk about that again?
Yeah, sure. I think because a lot of schools, a lot of clubs in Kenya are limited in terms of their equipment, in terms of their coaching. What you're generally dealing with is coaching sessions or lessons that have a huge amount of children in there, or young players in the sessions, but without the equipment. And therefore, a lot of the sessions will be, if they're rugby sessions, they will be 15 on 15 or large number versus large number rugby sessions. But what they don't have is structured crossover sports. They don't do much cricket. They don't do baseball, they don't do tennis, whatever it might be. And I think whilst you sort of take for granted, certainly my experience in English schools, children know how to catch a tennis ball, children know how to bounce a basketball, they know how to spike a volleyball or whatever it may be. There isn't that knowledge in Kenya just because of the experience they've had. So I think in terms of the skill sessions we do, even now with the senior sevens team, we do a lot of crossover sports. So it might be that we get involved with basketballs or volleyballs or tennis balls, or just incorporate a number of different balls into fairly simple skilled sessions, but sessions that expose the players to different balls or different games, or 360-degree games, that sort of thing. So that's been a challenge, and but I think with that, the positives of doing those sort of games and incorporating that into skill sessions is you can have a lot of fun, and players really enjoy doing it. Some of the more amusing sessions we've had have involved a cricket bat or a tennis net, and players really enjoy it. And I think if you've got that end goal of just trying to, I suppose, open players' eyes to different sports and open their skill sets to different challenges, then you've got that. But it was certainly something that I probably overlooked in terms of going in and getting involved in clubs. But it's a real challenge, and I think those core skills, if they can replicate that with smaller balls or under pressure of multiple shape balls or whatever it might be, if they can do that in skill sessions, then handling a rugby ball obviously becomes a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. And I've definitely been guilty of overlooking it myself too. And it wasn't until Richard Cheatham came onto the podcast that I started thinking about it. And he actually mentioned that in a warm up, there's several hundred hours of contact time that you have with the athletes, that if you're just phoning that warm up in and doing the same thing by rote every 15 minutes at the beginning of every session, you're missing out on a huge amount of opportunities for skill development and decision making. So yeah, I have a great time like making up games and stealing games and stuff like that, and definitely the athletes enjoy it too.
No, I totally agree, and I think even now we will be in whichever tournament it is, and in the morning the strength and conditioning coach normally likes to take the boys out for a bit of a primer, I suppose many people sort of call it, or a warm up. But we'll always go out with a tennis ball and a tennis racket and play a few games that boys really enjoy. It takes the pressure off. It puts smiles on faces. But I think again, it's really, really important to get the players, as many as you said, get them involved as much as you possibly can, and really sort of utilise even the down times that you have with players, and not putting it into a club perspective, whether it's a bus journey or it's at a hotel overnight. I think you can really use that time to have fun, create a bit of a team culture, and put smiles on faces. But actually, what you're getting out of it is really useful skills, hand-eye coordination, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so a lot of your earlier coaching was in the 15s part of the game, and now you're fully into the sevens coaching aspect. How's that transition going from one to the other? Was it challenging, or was it more that you've always been a fan of the game, so it was a bit simpler and just you had to make some adaptations?
Yeah, I guess a bit of both. I played a bit of sevens when I was still playing, and coached a bit of sevens on the sort of club circuit, as it were, when I first got out to Kenya. But there are certain aspects of sevens you can't get away from. It's it's obviously a really unique game, and some of the statistics are very, very different to 15s in terms of the kilometres players travel in 14 minutes, and they're covering 120 minutes a minute, and 120 meters per minute, and heart rate is in that top 10% for pretty much the entire time they're playing. And probably my delivering of sessions and my session planning had to change, because although the strength conditioners all look after many aspects of the physical training, you've still got to replicate what you're doing in training to a game. So we probably train for a shorter amount of time and pack in a little bit more into that session, or certainly drive the players a little bit harder than what they might have been used to in 15s. So the intensity of sessions has certainly gone up, and we try and get more high-speed training within those sessions. We try and include a number of different multi-involvements for players. So what we don't do a lot of is purely attack or purely handling, but try and involve a bit of ruck, a bit of defence, a bit of attack, because the transitions are so quick in the game of sevens. And probably something that we've really tried to incorporate as a coaching team, myself and the head coach, is increasing the players' ability and their comfort in transitioning from defence into attack, or vice versa. And I think those first few seconds after a turnover in sevens is massive. So whether that's you lose the ball and you're trying to shut down the space, or get a ruck so you can have some sort of organisation, or whether it's getting off the floor to get into support, or moving the ball away from the transition zone, that's something that we try and incorporate a lot into our training. And then there's a few differences between coaching 15s and sevens. So the ruck and the breakdown looks a little bit different, and I guess it's going to probably look a lot more different with the new laws coming in. But the breakdown in terms of my coaching, I suppose, where in 15s you're trying to coach players to blast past the ball and take out players and have a long ruck. In sevens, what you're trying to do is trying to get them to clear the threat, but then lock into the rucks. You're only committing one player in that breakdown, and that's slightly unique to sevens. And I suppose aerial skills, and with the restart being so important in sevens, we spend a lot of time on our aerial skills. And I think probably one of the big lessons we took out of last season was we didn't have enough. We didn't have as many options as other teams did at the restart. We had one or two players who were very good at the restart, but what you really want to do is develop everyone so they're of equal threat in the air, and therefore it's a lot harder to defend at restart time. So those are probably specific areas that are different to 15s that I've had to spend a bit of time doing. And then just the way in which I suppose the week's structured and how training is structured, whereas in 15s you might play on a Saturday and players are quite sore and you generally rest them or recover them Sunday and Monday. 2 days of sevens and the warming up and the cooling down and then obviously the playing time takes a pretty big chunk out of the players. So we're very limited in terms of the amount of time between tournaments that we can spend. So it might be that we have one session early in the week that we incorporate recovery into it, but it's very much a clarity or a walkthrough session. And then it might be that you only have one or two rugby sessions after that. And the challenge is to look at what happened the previous week and find out what we did well, what we did wrong, and then looking at how realistically what can we fix, and trying to work out in terms of the time you've got your maximal returns might be from that, and then putting that into practice. So it's been really interesting, and I think it's obviously sevens is hugely dependent on a high level of skill, and we've got a lot of work to do in that area. I think the catch pass, the identification of space, probably putting our individual skills within a game plan. We've got a lot of progress to be made, and we'll continue to do that. But it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it, and I think personally as a coach, you've got to be efficient at coaching the real basics in the game, and that catch pass, the tackle, the breakdown, the restart may be pretty basic skills and sometimes overlooked in 15s. They're pretty crucial within the sevens game. But at the same time, I'm really trying to stay in touch with the 15s game, and I certainly wouldn't want to be pigeonholed as a sevens coach like some coaches have been. And I think it's really important to keep looking back at 15s and take trends from 15s into sevens. And I'll be really interested to sort of see how, particularly with the breakdown laws coming in, how they're interpreted by different coaches and different teams. And that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think both games offer a lot, and I tend to spend most of my time watching 15s, but every time I watch sevens, there's something that pops out to me that's, like you said, it's a different game really, and I think both as coaches both can really help you.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's not just rugby. I know you've had a lot of people on your podcasts of late that have talked about other sports and taking things from other sports, and I think that's really important. I think there's a huge amount that you can cross over into rugby and bring into rugby, but certainly the sevens is a very I found it a very isolated version of 15s, and it really puts players into the spotlight in terms of their individual skills.
Yeah.
And I think sevens it's probably become a more specialist sport than it was 5-10 years ago, and players now have to be good at everything. They can't just be a fetcher, and they can't just be a good attacking player. You really got to have an all-round player, and that's the challenge for me as a coach and for us as coaches in Kenya, is rounding off those players to be good all-round players.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned a few of the highlights there of your first year. obviously pretty excited about the upcoming season. And last time we chatted, you mentioned that for the first time ever, you're actually going to have a pre-season with the guys. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that's shaping up?
Yeah, it's there are a few challenges in Kenya, and like with most nations, you've got your various challenges. But I think for the last 3 or 4 years, players haven't had a pre-season, and their contracts have ended in May after the Twickenham Sevens, and then haven't been renewed until probably a month out from the season.
Wow.
Obviously, there's not much you can fit in a month, but we're fortunate enough this year to have the players contracted as of now, sort of August, and they've been in doing medicals and everything. So we've now got a 2-3 month pre-season, which will be brilliant. So we've spent a lot of time planning and a lot of time focusing on what went on in last season and how we need to improve and where we need to improve, and trying to bring in also some new players into it and increase the player pool. And next year is quite big not just with the World Series, but with the Commonwealth Games and the Sevens World Cup in San Francisco as well. So it's going to be a really full-on year when we start. So the next few months will be great in terms of the preparation time that we're afforded.
Yeah, and you mentioned bringing new players in. That also must be challenging to develop that kind of identification network in Kenya. And how has that worked in the past? What's been successful, and what are some of the challenges there?
Yeah, so you look at the 15s game in Kenya, and you go to watch a club match, and actually it's so unstructured that at times it looks like sevens, which is an interesting way of watching it. But actually, as coaches of a sevens team, it's very easy to see which of the players could make very, very good sevens players. And the head coach, Innocent Samuyu, who's a Kenyan, is fantastic at spotting young players coming through. So we've got a number of players that we keep tags on and we watch regularly in the 15s game, and then obviously the sevens game as well. So whilst we've got our core squad at the moment of about 13 players, we'll be inviting different players in to come and spend different amounts of times and sort of assessing them in terms of their core skills, and then trying to introduce how we're trying to play to those players and see how quickly they pick things up and how well they adapt to being put into that high pressure scenario. And last season we uncovered 3 or 4 players that then were exposed to World Series Sevens that came through it fantastically well, and guys like Brian Tanga and Derek Meyer, for anyone who watches the Sevens regularly, are really, really young guys, but in a very short period of time showed that they could play sevens at that level quite comfortably. So that was really pleasing to see, and I think certainly one of the highlights that I found in terms of the coaching is when you get young guys and you spend quite a lot of time focusing on various aspects of their game, and then they show that they can do it in the World Series. And I think they've got huge futures, and hopefully before now and next July with the Sevens World Cup, we'll have blooded a few more players, and the Kenya national team will be in a much stronger position as a result.
Sweet, yeah, it's exciting, and it's still a while away, the Sevens season, but I'll be looking forward to seeing how the boys go, and definitely keeping an eye on those 2 guys that you mentioned. You're just about to hop back on a plane back to Kenya. You've just had a few weeks back in the UK. Did you try and tie in any professional development over that time? And if so, what did you go for?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously our season finished in May. I then had a couple of months back in Kenya. I was still teaching, so school slightly delayed my off season, but got back to the UK for a few weeks, which was great. And I suppose firstly, sort of had a bit of downtime and caught up on a lot of rugby that I built a bit of a backlog up in watching. So watched a lot of the Super Rugby, watched a lot of the Lions, and then spent a lot of time rewatching our performances over the last season. I left it for a few weeks and I suppose let the dust settle, and then went back to have a look. And to see whether my outlook had changed on what I thought had gone on and how we were then going to build that into this upcoming pre-season and season. And so, as I said, spent a lot of time planning this pre-season, but I've also tried to get about a bit. So spent a few days with Bernard Jackman down at Dragons and seeing how he was settling into things down there. And
Sweet.
real eye-opener. He's obviously settled in very well, and we'll be really, really keen to see how he gets on. But I think particularly looking at how he conveys his message across to a new set of players, it's although I've been there for a season, with new players coming in, I think you've got a very, very small window to try and educate them on how the team plays, and picking up various techniques from him and how he goes about breaking that down and to, I guess, bite-sized chunks and players to be able to take that on board in a quick amount of time was really, really interesting. I spent a bit of time at Southampton Football Club, which was great. Again, picking up various things and seeing how that works. And I guess just had a few coffees with a few coaches and just to general catch-ups and trying to pick things up. And I love talking about rugby and love discussing various aspects of it, and trying to get some new opinions and sort of generating a bit of debate and sort of picking the brains of various people. So that's been good. Trying to read as much as I possibly can. Trying to listen to your podcast and a number of other podcasts, and at times it's difficult, and you go a couple of weeks without listening to anything. So you build up a bit of a bank of things you need to get through, and have tried to get through as much as I possibly can. Probably the biggest thing I've found that's been really beneficial is I built up about a season and a half worth of coaching journals that I'd written and jotted down notes, and it's very easy as a coach to write things down and quickly assess your sessions, but then actually not going back and reviewing it. And I know, listening to your interview with Dave Vessels a few weeks ago, his whole approach to actually video analysing his performance and encouraging his coaches to do the same, I thought that was brilliant, and that's certainly something that I'm going to try and incorporate. But actually, the biggest thing I found was I've tried to, over the last year or so, ask players after sessions and question players about the session we've done and the session that I've run, and asked them various questions about it. Pretty simple questions, I guess, but questions on the message that I was trying to deliver, or whether the session was challenging enough, or what the key learning that they took out of was. And I scribbled some notes down of their responses, but hadn't actually paid much attention to it. But I think the last few weeks have been great to go through that and see what they said. And I think it's something that I didn't do initially, because I suppose I was a little bit nervous as a young coach going in, wanting to display those not weaknesses, but
vulnerability, or
I guess so. But I think actually when you're dealing with players who played 300 plus sevens matches and have spent a decade on the World Series, you're missing a massive opportunity not picking their brains. And I think fortunate enough that some of the players that I'm coaching at the moment have got huge amounts of experience, and actually you can ask those questions and you can use those questions really beneficially, and it'll probably change the way that I coach going forward. You can ask those questions and you can use that feedback, but I think it still falls upon me and coaches to know what you're doing well enough and know what you're talking about inside and out. And I was trying to spend a lot of my time learning about what I'm doing and the message that I'm going through, so that when I'm delivering a session, you deliver it with confidence and sort of clarity and conviction, but at the same time being able to say I don't know something, or being able to admit that you want someone's opinion on something, or you want a player's feedback on a session. So one of the discussions I had last year with our head coach was actually around Kenyan culture, particularly in rugby. Questioning doesn't come particularly natural from players, and players are very prone to staying quiet. So it might be that we're having a team meeting and you say any questions, or you ask a player for his opinion, and they stay very quiet. And one of the things we're trying to do is really promote questioning and get questioning as part of our culture, because I think as soon as you do that, probably the player buy-in increases, and players' understanding of what they're doing and what we're trying to achieve goes up. So in terms of me not being a role model, but leading that questioning and in asking the players, and it's something I try and do on a one-to-one basis if I'm on with a player, and constantly try and ask questions and what are your thoughts on this, or what was your thought process here on this clip, or what did you see in this scenario that made you make that decision? Hopefully by me asking those questions, it'll sort of increase players' comfortability in terms of them asking questions as well, because it's something we've improved on, but we've got a long way to go in trying to create that culture where players do feel comfortable enough to ask questions and share opinions.
Yeah, it sounds really similar to what Damien McGrath mentioned in the chat I had with him with coaching Samoa, is those cultural kind of boundaries where the adult or the authority figure, they're the ones who you listen to, no questions asked, kind of thing. But that must be quite the challenge to try and reverse like a generation of that in 1 year. So definitely a build on for you for sure, no doubt.
No, definitely. And I mean, as Damien said, I've spoken to him about it personally as well. I think you're right in terms of that's the Kenyan mentality. They're extremely respectful people. They're extremely polite. They're extremely quiet around not people of authority, but coaches and that sort of thing. But it's probably even more so from the rugby. From my experiences in rugby, I think coaching and teaching children at school, and I teach children up to the age of 13, but actually as soon as you invest a bit of interest in a young child, or invest a bit of interest in what they think, ask them questions, ask them to offer their opinions, you can almost see in the way they react, their buy-in and their interest in what you have to say goes through the roof. And I think it's that ability to make people feel valued, and I'm certainly exactly the same. As soon as you feel valued, you feel like you've got a bit of a buy-in to something, your interest and your ability to contribute goes up massively. And I think certainly that questioning is a tool I'm trying to use as much as I can in my coaching.
For sure, awesome. All right. Well, we always end the show with the same 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up in England, who was one of the players that you looked up to and really respected and wanted to emulate a little bit?
Yeah, probably I'd have to say Johnny Wilkinson. I was 12 or 13 when England won the World Cup, and he was just the ultimate role model in terms of his attitude, in terms of his approach to training, and his he also put the team first, which I think is a really, really important message with many of the with many role models that sort of in the current day. It's quite tough to find someone who is the sort of all-round package, and I think he very much was. And I listened to every possible interview with him, every newspaper column that was written about him, and every match he played, and tried to emulate him, and he was a fantastic role model. So yeah, definitely say Johnny.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you said that last time, and you mentioned the World Cup last time. I'd hoped you would have changed that for this interview, but that's fine. No problems. We'll go with that. What about now? Who are some players going around that you like watching?
From 15s, I really enjoy watching Michael Hooper.
Yeah.
Not just saying that to make up for my last answer. I think Michael Hooper's he's first and foremost an outstanding player, and he's someone I really enjoy watching because he punches above his weight. He expresses a lot of character on the pitch, and he's also really consistent. And certainly watching the Waratahs this year, in a team that massively underperformed, he was the one player that every single week would step up and would be head and shoulders above the rest. And I think I love that segment of him being mic'd up in one of the Super 15 games Super Rugby games, and listening to his leadership on the pitch.
Yeah, it's fantastic, wasn't it?
No, it was brilliant. It was, I loved the way that he did it, and it looked like it wasn't forced. It was coming really, really naturally to him, and we'll be really interested to see how he gets on with the Wallabies captaincy. But then, probably from the Sevens game, the one player that I loved watching was Roscoe Speckman, who's one of the South African playmakers, and I can say it through a slightly forced answer, but he was an absolute nightmare to play against. And every time we came up against South Africa, it was nigh on impossible to try and put together a defensive plan to keep him at bay. But he's one of those players that was brilliant to watch. Ability to score from nothing was exceptional, but he was also, alluded to earlier, this sort of hybrid Sevens player. He was also extremely good in defence. Was a real threat at the breakdown, and he won a lot of games. Although he was in a very good South African team, he won a lot of games with some individual brilliance. So really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, he's pretty special, and they got some really special players on that South African Sevens side for sure. And and that Michael Hooper video, I'll try and dig that up and put it on my website because it's awesome. Just the way he talks to the players, and you can see it's genuine, and he cares a lot about the team's performance and the guys around him. So I'll try and dig that one up. What about coaches? Who's a high level coach you respect and like what they're doing?
Yeah, Sir Gordon Titchens. He's even before I got into the Sevens game, I used to love reading about him and listening to some of the podcasts he'd been on or some of the YouTube videos. He was obviously coached the All Blacks Sevens team for over 2 decades, and he's now coaching Samoa. And his record's unbelievable. 10 World Series and 4 or 5 Commonwealth Games gold medals, and he's taken, I think it's somewhere over 40 players and made them into All Blacks into the 15s game. And I think listening to him, he's a pretty ruthless coach, and he's uncompromising. But I suppose what the thing I really, really respect about him is his hunger and his consistency. And he hasn't just had 1 or 2 good years; he's had 2 decades of success. And I've been in awe of him over the last year, and I've had the opportunity now to coach against him. And he loves a coffee, and so do I. So I've had a couple of coffees with him, and have picked his brains and tried to sort of appear like I'm not a competition winner interviewing him, but I've loved seeing him in action, and think he's an outstanding coach.
Oh, cool, awesome. And what about someone in the grassroots of the game who's chipping away and working really hard that you feel deserves a shout out?
I've got 2 guys. First one was a guy, Nick Greswell, who was my first 15 coach at school. And really, he had a massive impact on me, fostered the love of the game in me, I think, in many respects, and also gave me my first opportunity in coaching in the year I had out of playing, and invited me back and gave me a lot of responsibility. But as a coach, he's one of those coaches who's got the ability to put a lot of trust in players, even at school level and 17, 18-year-olds, and he gives players responsibility and gives players sort of control of the team, but whilst always maintaining control and overseeing everything and having that final say. And he was someone we respected massively at school, and I chat to him fairly regularly now, and I think he's a brilliant coach. He's just headed back up into North England. I think we'll be back involved with Newcastle Falcons in their community programs there.
Awesome.
But it's a brilliant coach. And the other one is a guy, Chris Brown, who coached me in my last year as a player at Taunton Titans. He's a forwards coach and was just the most enthusiastic guy on the training pitch. And that enthusiasm rubbed off on everyone. He loved what he was doing. He was, I'm pretty sure he was not all there in the head. He was crazy in terms of his methods. But he just loved it. And I think the thing that struck me most about him was his ability to really instill a positive approach on everything we did, and even the players that weren't selected in a match day squad or that week, he'd give them more attention than the guys that were selected. So I remember being sat down and being told I wasn't playing, but he'd then done a 5-minute presentation on either my previous game the week, and it really individualized and would then work with you massively hard on your one-on-one work-ons or after the session or before the session. I think it's a real challenge as a coach to keep everyone positive and the guys who aren't playing. It's a real challenge to keep them motivated and keep them working towards something. And that's something now that, as an assistant coach, I think I'm in a good position to. I don't have overall say on the team, and therefore I can go back to players who aren't involved and show them a bit of care and a bit of credit for what they are doing, and try and get them into the starting team. And he did it brilliantly, and I've spent a lot of time thinking back to what he did and carrying on some of those techniques.
Yeah, that's great. That's a awesome way to end the show, and it's always one of the tougher things of coaching is telling a player that they're not actually going to play that weekend. So yeah, some good lessons there, and thanks for sharing it. So yeah, all the best with getting back to Kenya and prepping the guys for the HSBC season. I now have 3 favourite teams: Australia, Canada, and Kenya. So I'll be supporting you guys over there, and yeah, thanks again for coming on for a chat.
Brilliant, thanks Andy. No, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Awesome, cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us on Twitter at rugbycoachscnr or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.